Okay, let's check this out. Make sure everything's good. Looks like we're good. We're good. Yep, good. Alright, we are back again. More debates. Let me get everything set up. All right. We're back again. We're going to see what kind of antics we could get into. We're going to focus topic over here. And a different one here. Alright, and beautiful. So we are back. A couple different topics on the table for today. Seems like we get a lot more like socialist and pro-choice people lately. So we'll continue having chats with them as well. So feel free to continue that. All right. Hey, what's up? What's the stream? We are just discussing pretty much anything that people disagree on. With me, all my beliefs are in the Discord, and all my beliefs are in the description over on Twitch, and yeah, the main topic is just if you believe in God, feel free to change my mind. Also, it seems like we get a lot of socialists and pro-choice people, so any of those people are also free to attempt to change my mind on those issues. Do you follow the World Cup? Not, I haven't been following it. I know, I keep seeing everyone, like, the dude from, Norway or whatever is just, like, I forget his name, is it, like, Holland is just, like, an absolute unit. I think, I've been seeing that and clips from him, but no, I don't really follow it. You're an Orthodox Christian. Nice. I think, I mean, I would certainly consider myself a just straight up atheist. I mean, if you think I'm wrong, I would certainly love to hear why you believe in God. But yeah, I think yeah, the World Cup stuff I haven't really been following too much. I've just seen some of the clips of the Holland dude, him just being an absolute beast. Hey, what's up, Ben Scholes? How's it going? I hope everything's going great for you. But yeah, I think pretty much any of my beliefs are fair game. Again, you can check out find it peaceful, love the community. What, for the Orthodox Christian community? I think that's absolutely fair to be involved with a church just for like a sense of community and such. I think that there's still an underlying fact of the matter to answer that I think is quite important, but yeah, it's certainly not like an issue to be religious just for community, but you know, I still think there's an underlying fact of the matter that's important to answer for yourself, but engaging in the community is not like a bad thing. Certainly something lost on a lot of people is engaging in community, and churches could be a good place for that. But yeah, I think that there's still an underlying fact of the matter. I would urge pretty much any Christian that's just like, well, it's the thing I do, or I like it. Truth is very important. But yeah, I think we'll also see today if we get some more people with the like socialist stuff, and that seems to be quite a major op right now. We'll see. But yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with like religion in terms of like community sense, but it's more or less like the equivalent of like a utilitarian thing at that point. Do you want the socialist here, lol? Yeah, I mean, they seem to be like the biggest people that we end up arguing with, so I invite pretty much anyone that disagrees, so yeah, we want them here. We want them to see if they can change my mind on socialism. I used to be a socialist a while ago, but I certainly don't believe in it anymore. I think it's a lot of the like continental philosophers are a little bit wacky, so I don't tend to want to associate with them. So anything past the original like Marxist stuff is like, so you enjoy the fighting? I don't really enjoy like fighting per se with people. I'm generally like a non-confrontational person, so like I'm not innately looking to go out and get into a rhetorical pissing match with people and debate. It's not exactly what I'm looking to do, but if that's what people do, then I guess I'm willing to engage as well. I think I'm just more interested in ideas. The best way to hear that is just people just listening to people. So yeah, I think I don't know if I innately enjoy fighting with people or arguing per se. Who's my favorite philosopher? I don't know if I have a particular favorite. I guess if you look at some of my thinking, it's going to have a little bit of influence from Aristotle, probably. I guess I'm more in the scholastic tradition, so it may be, I don't know, because a lot of philosophers historical, it's tough to like truly like them or like have a favorite, because a lot of them had like issues I would still deeply disagree with. Like a lot of philosophers that would argue for objective ethics would support slavery. Like I think even like Immanuel, was it Kant? I think Kant said in one of his writings he suspects that certain peoples have certain rights over others, and he thought like black people should be subservient to white people. Like some of these people had some really wacky ideas. So what about an alive philosopher, if you follow any? I don't know if I follow any that are still alive. Maybe theologists, which I guess are like a type of philosopher. So like in terms of theologists, like I read a lot of Bart Ehrman's stuff. I think his takes on the Bible are interesting from a perspective similar to mine, of like being religious for a long time and then stopping being religious. But I guess that's not, I guess it's just like a vein of philosophy. But Bart Ehrman's probably like the most recent philosophy vein person I actively have read their stuff. And maybe if you include any sort of like, maybe if you include like Alex O'Connor into that, but he's not like, I guess it just kind of depends on what you mean. I guess people that engage in philosophy that I like. Bart Ehrman's, I think, got a unique perspective. But again, that's more like theology, but I guess still philosophy. But I don't know. I guess I just try to like read a bit and try to just think things through myself. I guess it's just kind of weird to me to be like, well, this particular philosophy is like amazing to me. It's just kind of an odd thing to do. I don't know. I think I read a lot of Bart Ehrman stuff, but again, it's theology in particular. Yeah, like even like who's the dude? I've been reading his stuff. A lot of his quotes just go hard. But he's dead too. It'd be like Ragnar Redbeard, I guess. I've read a lot of his quotes recently. What the hell is it, like Daniel Dennett or like, let's see, Ragnar Redbeard. It might be Arthur Desmond, that's who I'm thinking of. Daniel Dennett, someone else. Arthur Desmond's been really fun to read. Like his stuff is just like super vitriolic for the sake of being vitriolic. I don't know. It's like the ultimate nihilism. He's just like, ultimate might makes right. Just a lot of his quotes just go hard. It's like a fun read if you like almost like horror stuff or like anything like that, to read his he goes by Ragnar Redbeard is like his pen name. But yeah, he has a book called Might is Right. He's not alive still, but I've been reading his stuff a lot. Like his views on religion and everything is just like crazy. Like, I don't know. It's just like refreshing to read, like just like blatant, I don't know, unapologetic everyone else shut up type of thing, I guess. I don't know, there's something cool about it or entertaining. I wouldn't say his philosophy is like actually good, but it's fun to read. Same thing with pretty much any like nihilist, like Nietzsche and stuff. Like I think it's, I don't know. I think there's just something like pure about reading that type of stuff. I don't know. But yeah, I guess I haven't been reading a lot of like truly alive people stuff, I guess. Unless you count some of the theologians, but I don't know, I guess like Bart Ehrman and stuff, but I guess it's a vein of philosophy, but yeah, I don't know. I've been trying to dive into like theology in particular. Probably like my next project is gonna be like meta ethics in particular, so I'll probably dive a lot more into that. Probably as the next set of reading to do. Because yeah, I mean, my main project so far has been theology. So, and in particular, theodicy, or like different perspectives on the problem of suffering. So that has been like my main set of reading for the time being. But I don't know. We'll kind of see where it leads. Like I keep getting, like now I found Ragnar Redbeard and it's just fun to read for like entertainment. So I don't know. The reading list keeps growing, so like at some point I need to do a redive on evolution again. Yeah, I can add Discord to my bio. Yeah, sure. Let's see. Yeah, that's weird. Let's see here. Edit. Let me update. Give me like 2 seconds. Come on. Where would that be? That would be there. And give me 2 seconds. God damn. So here. 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 Okay, that should be updated. Why are we... What game are you playing? I'll ask again. What fucking game are you playing? I won't ask again nicely. You don't have 2 seconds? Okay, I'll chill. N-O... Ooh. Really? Okay. Awesome. Give me 2 seconds. Yeah, let's clear that. Beautiful. Brilliant stuff occurring today. Awesome. Is your stream about looking at you? Absolutely. No, it's just if you disagree with me, feel free to change my mind. If you're passionate that God exists, let me know why you think God exists. I think God does not exist. IRS. I was joking. Have a laugh, my guy. I hope I was funny. Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, I think, we'll see. I mean, the stream kind of just turns into whatever people start arguing with me about. Usually whenever, like, the big socialist streamers are done on Twitch, we usually get a lot of socialists in here. Or a lot of, like, pro-choicers. They'll kind of stumble in, and then the stream usually turns to that. So, we'll kind of just see. We'll just gotta see as things go. Enough said. But yeah, I think generally the main things that we're focusing on recently, I think the pro-life, pro-choice debate is coming into the limelight a lot, and I get a lot of pro-choice people that disagree with me since I'm pro-life, so I'm sure they'll stumble in at some point. So we'll see. I'm sure the socialists will stumble in at some point. They usually do, but the main target has been the God debates recently. Because, yeah, I used to be religious for a long, long time. I'm not religious anymore. I'm not agnostic anymore. I was agnostic for a little while. I would consider myself solidly atheist. I do not believe that God exists. So, that's the main target. Is if someone thinks I missed something, feel free to let me know. I think I went through most of the major arguments, but maybe I missed one that's more convincing out there. You know, maybe there's a version of a particular argument that I just haven't heard. So, the bare minimum, you could certainly attempt to give me one of the major arguments, or if you have something more creative. So, yeah, I mean, that's just going to be the general idea. Like, especially the, any of the, like, theological arguments. If you're going to do, like, if you have a good answer to the problem of suffering, if you have like a really good theodicy or defense of it. I think the two major biblical defenses are bad. Do you drink? Nah, I don't really drink. And just not a fan of being out of my right mind and being drunk all the time. Like, I don't know, it's just not my idea of a good time. Once in a while, have a drink, but nah. It's not my big thing to do. Everything I've seen on drinking, even if you occasionally drink, like you're raising your risk of liver disease and chronic stress. Like, it's just not great for you. So occasional is fine, but not a big fan of drinking. And even then, like, I don't know. Do you smoke? No, I would never really smoke. I like breathing. Although I work in an industry filled with smokers and drinkers, and some of them somehow live to be 80, so, but I don't want to be coughing all the time in my 80s, even if I manage to, like, miss lung cancer. Like, I don't know, I don't want to get winded walking up steps. It's not, like, an attractive fate to me. Like, I wouldn't even really tempt, like, using, like, anything nicotine related. Even if it's, like, okay, even if some of the nicotine products aren't, like, innately bad, it's like, well, it's still, like, a waste of money. I could invest that or be working towards greater wealth later on. Why would I commit myself to being addicted to nicotine and spending money that I could otherwise be investing or doing something more productive with? I don't know. It's just like an extra vice that keeps a lot of people poor. I don't know. Like, it's crazy to me to, like, see people, like, especially a lot of the people in the trades where I work, since I'm a plumber and HVAC guy. Like, I think watching them throw half their paycheck away on, like, gambling, drinking, smoking, it's just like, man, this is insane. It's like, oh, I'm paid, immediately buy 30 scratchers and go get wasted. Oof. Do you invest? Yeah, I do invest. I do some active investment, and then obviously I invest in terms of retirement. You gotta max out your Roth IRA as young as you possibly can. Start maxing that out. Absolutely. It's bad not to invest. You are missing out on a lot of potential wealth and potentially going to have to work longer than you need to work. Just kind of shooting yourself in the foot. But yeah, I max out a Roth IRA, manage it mostly myself. I'm not, like, dumping it into, like, a money mutual fund or anything. And then in terms of personal investment, I mess around with a little bit of the money. I don't really day trade or anything. I think day trading is like a joke. I'm European, but I invest in stocks. Yeah, absolutely should. I mean, it's like the easiest way to get wealthy. If you just diversify and pick a couple, like, solid companies, I mean, they will make you rich. Or if you just invest in probably like S&P 500 or Dow Jones or anything of the likes, you're gonna be A-okay. So, yep, like, I dump just to be as low risk as possible because I'm not really into day trading. I think it's kind of a joke. I will do some medium-term arbitrage, but long-term arbitrage is the main thing I do, and with that, I just invest into the S&P 500. And then medium-term arbitrage, I've tried a couple times. Do you do stocks? Yeah. Yeah, I've made a couple really good trades. My first one was DoorDash. DoorDash was like way low there for a while because everyone was upset at them for not paying their drivers well. But I was like, well, if Uber's doing well and is like way outperforming DoorDash, there's no reason DoorDash will catch Uber eventually. So I did a bit of medium-term arbitrage and bet on DoorDash. That paid off. And then I did some more medium-term arbitrage. Came to the conclusion on Intel that Intel, if NVIDIA and AMD are doing just fine and skyrocketing, there's no reason Intel shouldn't. So I bought in on Intel. Doubled my money on that. So yeah, I do some medium-term arbitrage in stocks, but I mostly just let the S&P 500 just diversify for me. Yeah, because individual stocks is innately going to be some risk. So if you want to mitigate your risk to net zero, then you have to just diversify or just buy ETFs. But yeah, I think you could do medium-term arbitrage with decent success, but certainly I think short-term arbitrage and like day trading is just silly. It's basically dead to algorithm. Most recent investment. So after I sold Intel, I actually went into some of the commodity-based stocks. So I actually bought a decent amount of Nike and Under Armour and a little bit of Unity stock as well for game development stock. Because yeah, I think the commodity markets are like way undervalued right now, especially with inflation the way it is. Like I don't see why all the commodity-based companies aren't growing more. It makes no sense to me. So I'm betting on medium to long term that they grow. Brendan Maudlin, hey, what's up? Would you like to debate me? Yeah, I mean, if you disagree with me on anything, you can feel free to join the Discord, link in the description or the bios. We could have a conversation. You need to be 18 years or older, obviously. I'm going to ask what your age is, and you need to ideally have a legitimate disagreement prepared, right? All my beliefs are in the description in my Discord. I believe it's in the About Me section. I think most of them are current. Also on my Twitch, all those beliefs should be current. But the main thing we're focusing on is the God question. I don't believe in capital G God. Can I debate you on the live stream for atheism? I'm 20. Yep. Feel free. It should be in the bio now. I don't know why it wouldn't be. Yep, as long as you're an actual, like, theist of some kind, that's acceptable. Why is it not showing up in the bio anymore? It should be. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. So the cosmological argument, yeah, if you'd like to run the cosmological argument, you could do it through chat, or you could hop in and we could discuss it if you join the Discord. Either way, I reject the cosmological argument. The universe cannot create itself because that would mean it existed before it existed, which is logically impossible. So the cause of the universe must be outside of the universe. It must be timeless. Yeah, I reject that. I'm an eternalist. I think the universe always existed. And I also reject that everything has a cause. I think there's some eternal things. So, like, in the formalized argument, I guess, of the cosmological argument, I reject P1, or premise 1, that everything has a cause. I reject P1 in the traditional cosmological argument. I think time doesn't have a cause. It's always existed. I also think potentially actualization has always existed. If the universe has existed forever, then we have to ask, how do we get to this present moment? An infinite amount of time would mean an infinite number of moments had to pass before today. Yep. An infinite amount of moments did pass before today, or an eternal amount of moments. But if an actual infinite number of moments existed before now, how could we ever reach the present? It seems like you would have to finish an infinite journey, which is impossible. I think it's possible. I think if you think God can be eternal, then clearly things can be eternal. Time is an example of something that's eternal. It's impossible for time to have never existed. It's logically impossible. Time has always existed. So I'm also inclined to think that energy always existed as well. So at least for the time being. I guess I'd be agnostic on it for the time being, but I'm leaning towards it's always existed as well. It probably just collapses to the wave function at some point. But it's hard to say with energy in particular, but I think time is an example of something that has always existed. But time isn't eternal. We have an expiration date, as does everything else. So us being alive is not eternal. I agree with you there. Yeah, we're going to die, but I think you have a little bit of a misunderstanding of what time is. I think time is just the dimension on which change occurs, which that dimension has always existed. Also, modern cosmology points to the universe having a beginning. No, modern cosmology points to the Big Bang, or a hot, dense state suddenly expanding, not... if you're going to invoke science, most scientists are agnostic to how the hot, dense state got there. And a lot of them are starting to think that it's always been there, like with a big bounce, big crunch model. The universe is expanding, and evidence like the cosmic microwave background suggests the universe has not existed eternally in its current form. So the question becomes, why does anything exist at all? No, I think that's a different set of questions. The universe started existing, or matter started existing, but I think energy was always there and time was always there. And I think that there's plenty of physicists that would agree with that. Modern cosmology is a scientific study of the origin, evaluation, structure, and eventual fate of the universe, anchored by the Big Bang Theory. It integrates general relativity and particle physics. Yep, I'm aware. Yep, I think that there's just parts of reality that have always existed. It's just the physical universe or matter started existing and it came from energy, but I think energy has always existed. And I guess if you ask me what started the Big Bang, it's probably gonna relate to like the wave function or something. I think I'm inclined to think that, but both particle physics and general relativity have expiration dates. But that wouldn't change. So I disagree with that assumption. I tend to lean towards a big bounce, big crunch model. If we're talking specifically physics, I think this is a bit of a pivot from the general cosmological argument, or it doesn't address the existence of time. It just kind of moves to something else. But I think that entropy probably can reverse and acts like a wave, and I think that there's evidence to suggest that entropy can do that. And if that's the case, there's no reason to think that we just collapse to like a wave function of entropy. This would change your theory of things being infinite and not having an expiration date. No, time is infinite. It's impossible to never not exist. At least going backwards. That's what I mean by eternal. It's never possible for time to come into existence. And I think the same thing's true with energy. And I think most physicists would say that they're agnostic to whether or not energy always existed, so it's up for debate. I lean towards it always existed, but... So, there's certainly things that are finite, but there's things that just have to have always existed. It's logically impossible for them not to exist. Like, time must always exist, because for time to go from not existing to existing, there would be a change, and change requires time. So it's logically impossible. So if time is infinite, where will you go when you die? I hope that I don't go anywhere. I hope that you just kind of disappear and die. It sounds like you're a little bit confused on the definition of time. I think our experience ends, but time still exists after your experience. I don't know what you mean by time there. I think our experience just stops when you die. I'll define time. Time is the definition in which change exists. You going from existing to not existing would be a change. So time would still exist even after you die. So I don't know what that has to do with anything. That seems like a non sequitur question. I think your conscious experience is just the same as before you were born. There was just nothing, and then after you die, nothing. Time will vanish when God comes to take his children. Okay, well now we've moved pretty far away. I don't think you're addressing time always existing. Time always has to exist going backwards. It's eternal. You could maybe argue like it could be brought to an end if like all change stops, but if all change stops, then just the universe is gone at that point. So it could come to an end, but it certainly can't have a beginning. It's the same topic, but more finite. Yeah, I mean, I don't think time has a beginning. It's impossible. Which at the bare minimum means that God is beholden to time, which means that God isn't the foundation of everything, which means God doesn't exist. So, I mean, I think you're trying to move away from the beginning of time. my point exactly, change will stop. I have no reason to suspect that it will forever stop. I reject that premise. I think there's decent evidence to suggest that entropy can reverse, but I have no reason to suspect time will stop, but I think it could stop and it still wouldn't change my point. My point is that it's eternal as so far as reality continues to go. I guess my point isn't that it's going to continue forever in the future. That doesn't make much sense. I think I would have to remain agnostic to that. And actually, I have no reason to suspect that's the case. I think we'll probably just start reversing entropy and go back to a hot, dense state again, and we'll probably start again. If I had to bet money, I'd bet on that, probably. Some sort of like wave function collapse, but not sure. I think a true scientist would have to remain agnostic on that. But yeah, I think this still doesn't address the eternality of time. I don't think time could have a beginning, which I think refutes the original cosmological argument. I don't think we've addressed that at all. But yeah, I guess change could stop, hypothetically, and you could run out of entropy, but then the universe would just be done. But that would just mean that time is eternal in one direction, so it only has a limit in one direction, not both. Time had a beginning? Nope, definitionally it's impossible for time to have a beginning. If time didn't exist and came into existence, that would be a change, which would require time. So you would need time to create time, so you would just still have time. Time on Earth began when God made his first man, Adam. I reject that entirely. The entire existence of the universe up to that point required time. And I also reject that he made a first man, Adam. But hey, Alan Ramirez, how's it going? Aloha from Hawaii. Hey. What's up? I don't think I've bumped into anyone online from Hawaii yet. Hello. But yeah, I think that time can't have had a beginning because you would need a change to occur which would require time. Are you a man of evidence? I will cease all arguments if you find a solid piece of evidence that shows God isn't real. Yep, I just gave you one. It's a logical piece of evidence. Proposition 1 is that in order for time to come into existence, you would need to go from a state of time not existing to a state of time existing. A state of affairs changing is a change. Therefore, time has always existed. So, time always existing means that God doesn't exist. Because God is defined, capital G God is the foundation of reality, or the foundation, well, I guess it's the ultimate foundation, just simplicator, which clearly can't be the ultimate foundation of time. So there's something that God isn't the ultimate foundation of. So therefore God does not exist. But do you have proof of this? I just gave you the proof. I can write it down for you. It's a brute fact. So what research? Oh, I see. So instead of addressing the logical point, you're going to move to evidentialism? Yeah, so I guess if you're going to do an evidential argument because you don't want to talk about a logical argument and you just agree that it's what I said's logically true, that's fine. I'm willing to accept that concession from you that you don't have a logical comeback. So I will allow you to change it to evidentialism instead and concede the cosmological argument. But I think I think illogical things don't exist. So if you're not willing to address a logical thing, I would just say that it doesn't exist. But, you know, we could go to evidentialism if you'd like. I think the vast majority of evidence points to God not existing, but I think you would need to concede that you don't have a logical explanation, or your one that you provided doesn't make sense. But yeah, if you want an evidential argument, I guess I would just say the vast majority of evidence points against God's existence. You're not going to see research with God's existence either. That's kind of implying science and the scientific method. God is not a scientific question, it's a logical and philosophical question. So you're not going to get any piece of research proving God or refuting God. That just doesn't even make sense. Unless you think you could literally, like, go look at God in the face. Like, you know, some researcher's going to, like, send a ship capable of doing that. No, it's not moving on. I can say that the sky is red and say it's a fact, but it's an opinion. Everything needs evidence. When was the last time someone went to court and didn't bring evidence? I think you're mistaken. In logic, there's just things that are self-evidently the case. If you can't disprove them, then they're just facts. You don't need a piece of evidence for something logical. A logical thing is evidence in itself. Like, for instance, the not operator in logic would disprove your point here, because we can't, like, do a study and get evidence of the not operator, but the not operator just exists. We know it exists. Same thing, you can't get evidence that 1 + 1 = 2. It just logically works. So 1 + 1 = 2 is just a fact. Where is this vast majority of evidence? Ask me for any source of evidence that proves God. I will show you. I mean, I agree that if you're going to do evidentialism and continue running away from logic and pretending that logical things don't count as arguments or evidence, then I agree there's a couple pieces of evidence that are tricky for God's existence, like the teleological argument's a little bit tricky, and I think it's mostly evidence-based. I think consciousness is tricky, or certainly proves something weird's happening. And then I would concede to you that, like, depending on what God you believe in, I think Christians have a little bit of a case in terms of saying Jesus existed, but what was your logical argument? Yeah, hold on. I'll just bring it up so I don't have to, like, repeat it again and again. Hold on. Oh, wait, I can't. I gotta get to the document first. But my argument is that time is a brute fact that has just always existed. It can't not exist, which means God didn't create it, which means God is not the ultimate foundation simplicator. There's some things he's not the ultimate foundation of, which means that God, in terms of his traditional sense, doesn't exist. So let me bring it up because I have it written. So I'm assuming we can see this. So proposition 1, in order for time to come into existence, the proposition time does not exist would need to change from true to false. All changes to all states of affairs occur within time. Time not existing is a state of affairs. Conclusion, time has always existed. I guess sub-conclusion, God did not create it. Or I guess God is not the foundation of it is more precise. But, yep, that's the general gist. 3 propositions. Follows a valid inference rule. I guess I would need to see where the inference rule is broken at to disagree, but there you go. Sir, you certainly are educated. My name is Brendan. I have to go because I have a class that starts at 30 minutes. What is this word, God? God is the ultimate foundation. When's your next stream? Probably tomorrow. I try to stream around 2 o'clock to like 5 o'clock Eastern time. EST, Eastern Standard Time. So, should be tomorrow. My job's kind of weird, so... I actually work for a Christian Baptist church, Grace Fellowship in West Palm Beach. Nice. It'd be cool to talk more to you. So if you ever want to come back out, or if you'd like to talk on Discord, I'm cool with that. Is this church Catholic or Orthodox? Baptist church, it's going to be like Protestant. Or like a vein of Protestantism. But yeah, I think that, nice man, I'll be back tomorrow. Cool, look forward to it. Again, feel free to, we have Discord, you can feel free. I know it's harder to convey things through chat than speech, so. And I think at some point we'll make just a simpler, two-way speech channel probably at some point that's not relying on Discord. But I think maybe only TikTok offers that service. I don't know if YouTube offers a link yet for two-way speech. I could probably figure it out if that's the case, but I'm sure figure it out at some point. Protestant denomination. Yep, good old USA. You're gonna end up with a lot of Protestants and a handful of Catholics. There's a few Orthodox people in the U.S., but most of the churches you're going to find are going to be like Baptist or Compassion or Lutheran. Some version of like Puritan or like Reformationist Christianity and Protestant Christianity. Like that's right up the alley of what I used to go to when I was religious. Our church was like non-denominational. Well, it was kind of, I guess, like Baptist in nature, though. But if we're being honest with some of the thinkings of the pastor, but yeah. I'm in Bulgaria, so it's mostly Orthodox. Yep. Yep. Going to see mostly Eastern Orthodox Church out there. Save that if you head a little bit more to the west in Europe, you're going to see mostly your Catholics. And then you come to the United States, you're going to get a lot of your Protestants just from the Puritan influence. Or the by-the-book influence. So, yeah. I mean, that's basically what I grew up with, is like hardcore traditionalist, I guess like Christian, I guess it would be more like evangelical, like Christian evangelical, conservative type. you know, you get the hardcore um, by the book theory, where you're not allowed any like church interpretation, which would be the disagreement between like Catholics and most of your Puritans or Protestants or non-denominationalists. Same thing with the Orthodox Church. I've actually been reading a little bit about their theology and the like Catholic catechism. I think if I did become Christian again, if I was ever convinced, it'd probably end up like Catholic or maybe Orthodox, because I think certainly some of Paul's letters or the epistles seem to be pointing to like we should keep some type of church tradition, and like you need to continue talking these teachings from Jesus and continue passing them on to like new saints or new disciples. And you basically keep going through the generations. So I think probably the Catholics and the Orthodox churches are probably closer to the truth, and they're probably a little bit closer to the original teachings of Jesus, if I had to guess, because the Puritans are just taking it as the book is written, which I think is a little bit tricky because the book is going to be one account and the oral tradition could be a little bit misinterpreted over time, just simply written in the book. So, because yeah, I guess that was always my main issue as well. Like, I don't think I would ever go back to being a Protestant or any sort of like non-denominational or like any sort of church like that, because it just, I don't know how you could possibly know how to interpret anything in the Bible without, because like most of it is based on oral tradition, especially the Old Testament. You certainly need some sort of saint or disciple to help you and help you interpret. You certainly got to think it through yourself. I don't think the Bible's literal. You would definitely struggle with that, which I guess is what I always disagreed with. It's probably even what like drove me away from Christianity ultimately. Because if you're not given help or theology from a central body that is supposed to be taught in the tradition passed down from Jesus, I don't understand how you know the, like, what the context of all the quotes that are believed to be accurate of Jesus. Like, I don't know. I feel like you got to rely on the oral tradition past, but that's like from an outside perspective too. I've been reading a little bit about theology, and I don't know. I think certainly Catholics have a little bit more standing than Protestants, but ultimately I reject God in general. But if I were to believe in God again, probably more likely to be Catholic or Orthodox. Because yeah, if you read the Bible, otherwise, if you don't have people, an additional oral tradition helping you, like the Bible on its own, like, in other words, don't read it itself, we'll do the thinking for you. Yeah, I mean, that's one issue I have, right? And that would probably hold me up, right? Obviously, I'm speaking as like an atheist here. But I think you could certainly just read the Bible as is and try to interpret it yourself, but since that itself is mostly oral tradition, if you weren't involved in the structure of the keeping the oral tradition, it's kind of tough to think of what the authors intended, because some of the words are inevitably going to be mistranslated or misunderstood to you. And that's also how come you end up with like some weird beliefs or like inconsistent beliefs coming from the Protestant church. And that's how come you end up with like kind of wacky positions. Like, yeah, because if you read the book as is, you could either decide to take it literally or interpret it. But if you're going to start interpreting it, you could only do like a deconstructionist approach. Like, you could just be like, well, this is what I think the author intended, which you're still inferring. it would certainly make more sense to like reach out to people that are supposed to have kept the oral tradition to like give the context on what those things said. But again, I obviously just reject the concept of God in general, so I'm just speaking from a atheist perspective. But I think like if I were seeing a Catholic and a Protestant arguing with each other, I'd probably stand with the Catholic and be like, well, the Bible itself is oral tradition, so it makes sense to talk to the people that are supposed to be keeping an oath of this oral tradition to like get what it's saying, I guess. It's funny knowing that if you just read the Bible and never heard what people say about it, you'd never know that the snake in the garden is supposed to be the devil. Yeah, that is one interesting thing with the Bible, because there were some early Gnostic Christians and Gnostic Gospels that were, when the church got together and discussed what parts of the Bible to keep, sometime around like 300 AC to like 800 AC, somewhere in there. Like, it's a pretty big time range, but somewhere in there. The church left out like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas, and I think the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And these Gospels seem to tell a little bit different of a story. There's like the Gnostic tradition basically said that like the snake is actually like the real God, or that was Jesus. And basically the God of the Old Testament was basically like an evil God. And now we basically have like this new like good God that's like, oh shit, why have you guys been listening to this evil God that's been trying to save us? So I think that's kind of fascinating that even the early church was like confused on how to take the serpent in the garden. The Gospel of Joseph is a wild ride. Well, yeah, I mean, they're just, I don't know, it's interesting. I mean, the demiurge, yeah, it's just kind of interesting. Like, I think I've even seen a lot of like Old Testament scholars basically come to the conclusion that the Torah, or I'm slipping on the word, but I'll just call it from the Jewish tradition, Torah, or Torah. They basically think it was just like passed on oral tradition. So it's like the Old Testament in itself, at least the first 5 chapters, are like kind of hard to say what they're actually referring to in general, or if the serpent thing is even like what people originally thought. Like maybe the serpent was supposed to be a demon, like in the original teachings, it just didn't get translated, but ultimately it's just an assumption. Like Old Testament scholarship's really weird. It's even weirder than like New Testament, because like the New Testament, like we have these Gospels and they're supposed to be, or at least they seem to be, some sort of account of what happened, but the Old Testament is also seeming to be an account of what happened, but we didn't get like a written version of it for like hundreds of years of when it would have originally been told or followed. So it's like, it's even farther away from the original teachings of like the 4 Gospels, or the canonical Gospels that are shown in the Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So yeah, I mean, they're just it's really weird. Like biblical scholarship, I think, is really, really tricky. It's been interesting to read like more like secular perspectives on the Bible, of like from like Bart Ehrman and stuff, and just like, what the heck does this thing mean? And the Gnostic Gospels are wild. Like, man, the Gnostic church was definitely a little bit out there. I mean, they had a completely different interpretation of a lot of these books. So yeah, there's certainly evidence that like the early church didn't even know how to like interpret the Old Testament now that Jesus has come back, or like what that actually means. Because some people just were like, oh, Jesus must have been the serpent, but other people were like, no, 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 Jesus, since he was tempted by the devil, like, we now have this concept of a devil, or Satan, or Beelzebub, or whatever translation you end up using. No, that must have been it. And so you basically have this split of opinion. So it is interesting. I certainly think the demiurge thing with like the bad god, or like maybe there's like a portion of God that somehow split off and is like a bad influence, and God is like trying to rectify his mistake, or any variant of that is pretty interesting. It certainly helps with the problem of suffering. It certainly is like a better theodicy than a lot of the theodicies given, or defenses of suffering. But yeah, I think I don't know. Some of those Gnostic Gospels are a bit of a wild ride. Like it's definitely like, what the heck was this early church trying to figure out? And yeah, because it is weird. Like once you, like if both churches like were like, yes, Jesus came back, he is the embodiment of God, now they have to kind of hash out what the Old Testament means. I don't know, I think there are just good deductive arguments for atheism, like the time argument, which got banned by the early church because no one could refute it. I agree, the time argument's really, really powerful, or just the eternal argument, or eternalism, is very, very powerful. Because in like the early church, they, or I guess what, it would have been like, I think 1300s is when the worst of the Inquisition was. But I think like one of the biggest targeted groups was people making the eternalism argument. I also know an argument that was banned by the church is just like souls have to be mortal. They can't be immortal, which freaked the church out as well. Although I haven't found anyone using that argument, I'd need to research it more, but that was one targeted by the church as well. They're basically like, it's literally impossible for your soul to be immortal. That's an illogical statement. I just haven't seen anyone like formalize the argument, and I've tried to think about how you would get like a syllogism to support that, but I haven't come up with one. I need to see if anyone argues that. Because that was another argument that was banned by the church, was like, it's literally impossible for your soul or whatever to live forever. Even if you accept the idea of a soul, it's impossible for it to be immortal. I don't know. Maybe we could do that bit of research. Like, I need to find if anyone's done like a syllogism for that. Syllogism for the soul not being immortal. Let's see if anyone's done one. I don't know if anyone has, but that would be like an interesting thing to explore and try to come up with one. Let's see. I'm not really seeing anything, actually. It's just more like evidential based. Or like people cite Aquinas and like say that like, oh, it's not actually like a thing or substantive thing. It's more like a blueprint, I guess, is the counter. So I don't know. I don't know if anyone's actually tried. Did Socrates do one? Hold on. This paper's arguing maybe Socrates had like a version, but he still believed in a soul. He just thought it wasn't immortal, like what most Christians believe. Socrates asserts the evidence of two categories. Okay, this is just him talking about dualism. I don't know. I feel like that'd be a good one to find out. This is his arguments for harmony. What is this? Proof for the human soul's substance. So this is just more people citing Aquinas. I don't think anyone has come up with a syllogism. I think I'll need to research that one. Joey WQ, what's up? Don't talk about me in chat. Okay. Socrates was too busy reminiscing on Bussy. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think anyone came up for a syllogism with it. Oh wait, maybe. Oh, maybe Aristotle did. Major premise: the form of a physical entity cannot survive the destruction of that entity's physical matter. The soul is the form of the human body, therefore the soul does not survive the destruction of the body. So I'm sure you haven't heard this joke before. Oh, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. That one's kind of okay, but like it still would require justification. Like, how do you know that a physical entity cannot survive the destruction of its matter? I guess. Like, you could just argue a soul anyway. Like, yes, the physical entity is not, but the soul isn't, right? All things whose existence is dependent upon a physical substrate perish when that physical substrate is destroyed. The soul is fundamentally dependent upon the physical body for its existence and operation. Therefore, when the physical body is destroyed, the soul perishes. So it's ultimately only like evidential still. I don't see, because you could just be like, well, how do you know that? That doesn't seem like a brute fact. So I might need to do some thinking on that. And try to think through a potential, like, logical, like, syllogism to defend that souls have to be mortal. Which would in turn refute many world religions. So, I don't know, maybe we could try to think of that one. That might be a good project to spend like a good, like 30 or 40 minute thinking session on a day for a little while and see if I could come up with one. I mean, like, that's a good starting point. All things whose essence or existence is dependent upon a physical substrate perish when that physical substrate is destroyed. The soul is fundamentally dependent upon the physical body for its existence and operation. Therefore, when the physical body is destroyed, the soul perishes. There's still a little bit missing from that needs further justification, I think. So I just need to think it through. Like, I'm sure you could start with that. Like, I think there's a fairly decent argument. Like if you start with like, maybe if you make the proposition that the soul is bound to the mind, and no, that wouldn't work either. Because ultimately, like what a religious person will say is they'll make the Thomas Aquinas argument for the soul and just be like, it's just a blueprint for you. And then like God takes that blueprint back. I don't know if that's a great one. I mean, the early church didn't have a refutation, but I mean, a lot of people you run into just won't have a refutation for that, but it seems like there could be something there. Like some type of syllogism could be built. So like premise 1 could be like all of consciousness is dependent on material. Or maybe all of the mind is dependent on material. The soul is described as part of the mind. Therefore, I guess premise 3 would be the mind ultimately decays. Or all of the mind ultimately decays. Or all the material will eventually not exist anymore. Therefore, the soul is not mortal. Ooh, that might actually be a start, because those are defensible premises, I think. Shoot, might have just come up with something. Hold on. Might have a new argument to add to the doc, actually. I need to write it out and see if it makes sense. So premise 1 is going to be, let's see here. Let me change this. Okay. So premise 1 would be that maybe like the soul is part of the mind. So P1, soul is within the mind. Yeah. God dang. Misspelled the crap out of that. The soul is within the mind. Because this is going to be something I feel like every Christian's just going to accept. Because it wouldn't make sense for it to not be in the mind or a part of your experience. And P2 might be the mind is bound by physical laws. P3, all things bound by physical laws are material. Final premise would be all material decays. Conclusion would be the soul is not eternal. That might work. I'll have to think on it, but yeah, we might give that a shot. I don't know. Or people can use that and build on it, I guess. I might need to put it into some different stuff online. But yeah, I think there could be something there. That's one of the arguments that was banned by the church, is the soul cannot be immortal. So there must be some argument that was just lost or people haven't brought back up that is just like the church just has no refutation for. There has to be something in that. That premise might be it. The soul is within the mind, right? I think most religious people would accept that. Even Aquinas was kind of, I think, hinting at that. It's like a blueprint for your mind, which would still involve the mind. Or it's like within your mind is the blueprint for your mind and all your behavior and everything. And then premise 2 would be the mind is bound by physical laws. This premise would be justified by special relativity. Special relativity is just difficult to refute with modern evidence. I think premise 3, all things bound by physical laws are material, I think is a factual case. I don't think we have evidence of something that isn't inevitably bound by a physical law yet. I think that's definitionally false, actually, so that's a self-evidently true statement. So it should follow from that the mind is bound by physical laws are material. So that would just say that the soul is a material. You need one final premise, which is that the material decays. The conclusion is going to be the soul is not eternal, which is a pretty powerful argument. I might try it. It could be refuted, but I feel like that's one you just have to risk being embarrassed on, I guess. And maybe there's something I missed. I'll think it through more, but that is an interesting one. Because it's one of the arguments that the church banned. You weren't allowed to, or you would have faced inquisition by the Catholic Church for. Would have been saying that the soul is not eternal. So there must be something you can construct out of that the church would have no answer for. Because I think even Thomas Aquinas, I don't think he gave any justification of the soul being out of the mind. It's just a blueprint of the mind, so it would still be like held there. So yeah, I don't know what people's response would be. I guess I would have to try to think it through, try to have a dialogue on it. It might just be one you ultimately have to just test and see if people can refute it. But yeah, I think that would be an interesting strategy. I know the time argument or the eternal universe argument was also one that was banned, so I think it's obviously like a go-to one because there's a simpler syllogism for that one that just, in order for time to go from not existing to existing, you would need time. Because time existing when it previously did not exist would imply a change occurred. So time has just always existed. But there's a few other ones there. Let's actually look into it. There might be some more good ones. Let's see. Arguments banned by the church in the 1300s. So the medieval Inquisition. 1277 is when the medieval Inquisition started. Double truth argument, banning the idea that a philosophical argument could prove something to be logical true while its opposite was spiritually true according to church doctrine. Bibi Netanyahu, shalom. Hey, what's up? God. Please don't tell me this stream was promised to you 6,000 years ago. I really want this stream. Please don't take it from me. Oh, that's funny. But yeah, I think, what are some of these? Or what? Limits on divine power. Arguing that God could not act outside the physical laws of nature. Such as asserting God could not create a vacuum. Ooh, I've never heard that one before. Wait, let's think about that. Why would it be impossible for God to make a vacuum? Like the vacuum of space. Oh, there's got to be a syllogism for that. So God, the conclusion has to be God cannot create a vacuum. Oh, maybe it's just that like a vacuum is a lack of creation. Lack of creation means it's impossible to create. So therefore God can't create a vacuum. Maybe it's that simple. Ooh, that might be a really simple yet tricky one. It's at least like a conundrum. Like basically it's like God creates nothing. That seems illogical. Ooh, there might be a syllogism there. I don't know. That's actually an interesting one. Man, who knew medieval thinkers were so smart? No, it's obviously there are some good medieval thinkers. But man, I might need to think of a lot of these. Denial of free will. Well, that's obviously one that's up for debate. I don't know if I would die on that hill of not having free will. So I don't know if I would attempt to keep that one. I do think free will is tough to defend and like true with our like modern understanding of neuroscience, but I still think like agency is real. It's just like free will is like a whole other thing. I don't know if I would die on that hill. The eternity of the world. Yeah, that's the eternalism argument. I already accept eternalism. So we don't need a new syllogism for that one. So we have a potential syllogism for the soul is not immortal. Rejection of the soul's individuality. Claims by philosophers like Averroes that all humans shared a single intellect, or that the soul was not a distinct individual and an immortal entity. Yeah, so we have one for immortality. Aristotle famously held that nature abhors a vacuum. In his view, a true void was impossible. Empty space with no matter was impossible. But that's just like obviously false is the problem. Like a vacuum is possible. It's just weird to say that you can create a vacuum. Because if you zoom in enough, there's like huge amounts of space between subatomic particles. So there are spaces without quarks in them and without higher particles. There could still be energy there, but matter can't be there. So I guess maybe that's like true vacuum, like no energy or matter is impossible. But no matter is certainly possible. Which I think they just didn't know that yet then. But I think his point, he'd probably still agree now that, like, you can't get a lack of nothing. Like, true nothingness is impossible, but like there would still be energy waves present even in the nothingness if he had like a modern view of physics. But certainly it's possible to have like no matter present somewhere. But I would say you probably still have to have energy, or like you would have to have some presence of like entropy present, which would suggest that there's energy there even if it's just like not usable anymore. So, yeah, maybe that could be a thing, though, is like maybe like you can't create a true vacuum, so therefore there's something that can't be created. Or like a vacuum just like comes into existence, it's not possible to create one. Or maybe it depends on how you define it, too. I guess a lack of matter or lack of matter and energy. That's actually really tricky. Because if you do like... Oh, I don't even know what the premises would be. Premise 1 would be that a true vacuum is impossible. Premise 2 would be like, no, then it's just refuted with like all logical possible things argument. It's a weird one. I don't know. Might need to think on it. I think the soul is not eternal one is like definitely plausible, but the vacuum one seems weird to me. So what was that one? Limit on divine power. Yeah, but it's refuted. So that argument's refuted then. No good. No good. The double truth argument, banning the idea that a philosophical argument could prove something to be logically true while its opposite was spiritually true. Well, that's just logic in general, so they just didn't have as good of a view of it yet. So that one's already no need to keep working on that one. Limits on divine power. That one's fairly refuted, I think. Maybe not. It's certainly like intuitively not refuted, but the claim God couldn't create a vacuum was never about God lacking power. It was about whether vacuum was a coherent thing to create under ancient Greek philosophy. Well, the argument I'm looking at, it's basically like the medieval arguments that the church prosecuted people for holding. So, like, people were arguing basically that, like, God can't do impossible things. And then they basically banned that argument. You weren't allowed to make it anymore. And they started, like, sending people to prison and killing them for heresy if they made that argument. So basically people would say that like it's impossible for God to just spin heaven in a circle. It's impossible for God to like create a vacuum. So he would still be beholden to the laws of physics, laws of nature, laws of logic, is basically their argument. Which the more sophisticated modern version, I guess there already is a syllogism for this, because you just simply ask, if God did not exist, would the proposition God does not exist be true? So I guess it's the same conundrum. It's just like a more sophisticated version. I guess the silliest, like, Reddit atheist version would be like, can God make a rock that's so heavy he can't lift it? But they were basically doing the equivalent with what they had back then, which is like they knew, or at least they, through the scholastic tradition, thought that vacuums were impossible. Because Aristotle's scholastic tradition would have continued through Europe, so they would have thought like true nothingness would be impossible. They would have held that like you can't just simply spin something in a circle for the sake of spinning it into a circle to be true. So they were arguing that. But like the modern version would be like, if God did not exist, would the proposition God does not exist be true? Because even like the Aristotelian view, or I guess like the Plato brought it in with transcendental traits. So like truth claims are transcendental. So you would have to hold that like everything that you could try to say exists must have truth claim possible with it. Which in turn just argues that like God is beholden to truth claim. But most people just accept, yeah, you have to do things that are logically true. That doesn't make sense. So, and then that's supported through, I guess, like divine simplicity. Like it doesn't make sense for truth to not be truth. So, yeah, I don't know. A few of these I think we already have them in more complicated forms, so I don't think we need like new syllogisms. I guess some of my syllogisms are already like that. But the soul one is going to be probably a new one. We'll try that out. We'll try that one out, given the chance. And then I think we need to start rounding out. I don't know what else we got to start rounding out. Maybe some more like evidential stuff. We could do a more detailed response on theodicy or just the problem of suffering. Ouch. But yeah, I think like I think maybe I already have one on the problem of suffering. I don't know. Basically, like the two biblical views for the problem of suffering, I think I've addressed them, but because the biblical views are absurd, so you ultimately have to go to like non-biblical explanation. Because the two biblical views, the apocalyptic view and the classical view or prophetic view, are both just like wild. Because like the prophetic view of suffering or theodicy is basically like God just does everything because we suck. So like if an earthquake happens, it's because sin is happening. But that would, the only way you could accept that is to be like the ultimate Calvinist and just say that agency doesn't exist, or we have no choice in the matter for things. Because certainly innocent people are killed by those things as well. So that classical view seems to be poor. Unless you just ultimately commit and just say we're not agents, so you get no choice in the matter. which would in turn mean that we're not agents, which in turn means you can't make free will argument anymore. But it seems intuitively false. Then there's like the newer, like New Testament view, or the apocalyptic view, which is like, I guess that like suffering is the cause of the devil and his followers, and basically they do all the, like, the devil would have like the supernatural power to cause like an earthquake, and like devil's follower has the possibility of doing like human caused suffering things, and you basically would say that like, oh, this explains all the suffering. It's either just the devil and like, or it's the devil and his followers, and so like God understands the suffering and he's coming back to like fight back at some point. And so it's like, just hang in there, he's going to save us, sort of thing. But obviously that seems messed up, because it's like, I think you would have to acknowledge that God is not all-powerful at that point, even logically all-powerful, because he doesn't have the power apparently to come back right now and fix it. So he's just waiting for some reason, but there doesn't seem to be a logical reason why he can't just come right now. So the apocalyptic view seems to fall short as well. Also, the apocalyptic view, I think you would have to reject agency, because innocent people don't get to have agency in the matter. So like, only bad people get agency effectively, which means that you should just be a bad person if the apocalyptic view is true, because at least you'd be an agent. So it seems like that would be more purposeful than being good. So to me, it would actually create a encouragement to be bad. So, and also there's a really clever refutation that I saw from Bart Ehrman that was like, okay, if you still try to accept agency, like, do you believe that we're going to go to heaven? Yes. Are we still agents in heaven? The intuition there is to say, yes, if your soul has a part of it that's agency, then you should have agency in heaven. If that's the case, that means that there's a place that exists where agents exist and no suffering occurs. Actually, only good things only ever happen. So if God has the power to make a place that has agents in it without having any suffering, then clearly agency can't be the cause of suffering. Or you would have to come up with some logical reason that like you need two places, I guess. You just have to have them, which is really, really odd. Because then it seems like God is just arbitrarily making people to hurt them for fun, and then is like, okay, here you go after. It's just kind of weird for an all-knowing being to do. If they don't know a way to do it any other way, it doesn't seem plausible to me. So, yeah, I don't know. I think we have decent understandings of the biblical views of suffering. I think the views given by the Bible are silly for suffering. I think you ultimately have to resort to like a non-biblical explanation for suffering, which then basically is like, okay, which one of those? I think that's probably just like the greatest issue, is just the issue of suffering, or the problem of suffering, or the conundrum of suffering. I think it's just like very, very difficult, because it certainly can't be answered biblically, because both the biblical views fall short. They're not logically true. At least they don't seem to logically hold. So you ultimately have to come with a non-biblical view. which I know a lot of people are like, well, free will or agency brings about suffering, but again, the heaven argument disputes that it's possible to remain an agent in a place that has no suffering, which would either mean that God is not able to stop suffering or is choosing not to, which is both problems for the ultimate foundation. So definitely ultimate foundation doesn't exist, at least on that issue. Also, like the I think some of the other views are just a little bit weird, where it's just like suffering is just like required to bring about the universe, but that one's probably the most convincing, but because that at least like accepts some scientific explanations. Like it's like, okay, well, you have to have a evolutionary process to bring about complex humans, so that process just requires suffering. So therefore, there was just only one way to bring about ultimate minds. So therefore, you just don't need the it's just a requirement for a physical world. But then the heaven problem, it's still like very, very difficult to explain away, because it's like, well, you could have just made souls then and skipped the material essence parts. So it's certainly cast doubt on dualism at that point. I don't know. Hey, what's up, Nitro Gold? Welcome back. But yeah, I don't know. I think that some of these arguments we've already got worked out, but might still need to continue expanding. I think we need to try out the soul one, but I don't know. We'll see if we can find a chance to use it. So we will see. But yeah, I don't know. I think that the general soul argument is interesting. We might be able to expand on that one. So yeah, okay. I actually need to wrap up stream here. I appreciate everyone that came out today and anyone that engaged in discussion. Anyone that isn't subscribed or following, go ahead, subscribe, follow, join the Discord. Oh man. Yeah, sorry, Nitro Gold. I gotta go today. I can't keep streaming. So I wish I could. If I didn't have a damn job. If bills didn't need paid. If only. But yep, we gotta go. So I appreciate everyone that came out today. Follow or join the Discord if you think, if you disagree with anything. All my beliefs are in the description on Twitch and in the Discord. So feel free to just DM me or let me know, and we could have a conversation about it.